German missionary Johann Adam Shaw von Bell was made the director of the Imperial Observatory during the reign of the Qing Emperor Shunzhi, responsible for reforming the calendar. As a close friend of Emperor, Shaw was exempt from court formalities. When the first European-style church was completed in Beijing, Emperor Shunzhi presented it with a plaque inscribed with the words, "Spiritual Realm."
Emperor Shunzhi was very ill with smallpox when he was young. At his deathbed, Shunzhi asked Shaw for advice about who should be the next emperor. Shaw told him it would be best to select someone who had already survived smallpox and was therefore immune. That emperor was Kangxi.
After Shunzhi died, government official Yang Guangxin led an attack against the missionaries. He claimed that foreigners could not be trusted. It would be better to have poor calendars than to have Westerners in China. At the time, Kangxi was only 8. The regent minister, Oboi, believed in the various accusations and imprisoned Shaw, Ferdinand Verbiest, and other missionaries. The following year, Shaw was sentenced to a brutal death. The other missionaries were beaten and exiled. Shaw was an elderly man when he was imprisoned. He soon suffered a stroke and was unable to speak. When he was beaten and interrogated, his assistant, Verbiest, would help answer. According to Qing records, on April 13, 1665, a meteor appeared. At 11 on the morning of the 16th, as the death sentence was handed to Kangxi and Grand Empress Dowager Xia Zhuang, an earthquake struck the Forbidden City and darkness fell over Beijing. The government officials were terrified. The Empress Dowager immediately revoked the sentence and released Shaw and the others. Shaw passed away at the age of 75 and was buried next to Ricci in Beijing. Their names were written into the history of Ming and the history of Qing. Their lives belonged to their beloved China.
Did you know that of the missionaries Jesuits sent to Asia, only 1/3 would be alive after 5 years? Yes, for Jesuits. If we sent 6 people over, we knew that only 2 would remain 5 years later. The other 4 would be gone.
The precocious Kangxi took control of the government and summoned both the anti-Christianity official Yang Guangxian and the missionary Verbiest to the observatory to predict various astronomical phenomena. Verbiest was accurate on all accounts, while Yang failed every task. Kangxi immediately installed Verbiest as the new director of the Imperial Observatory, ordered solemn funeral ceremonies for Shaw, exiled Yang, and imprisoned Oboi. From then on, Kangxi and Verbiest became close friends. Based on Verbiest's memoirs and history of the 2 Tartar conquerors of China, whenever Kangxi was unhappy, seeing Verbiest would immediately brighten his mood. On March 22, 1692, Kangxi issued an edict listing the contributions of missionaries to China and granted them freedom to evangelize. Kangxi even made a personal appearance at the Xuanwu Gate Church, presenting them with 2 plaques, "Revere Heaven" and "True Origin of All Things." He also composed poetry to praise Jesus. When the work on the cross was finished, blood formed a creek. Grace from the west flowed 1,000 yards deep. Heaven's gate was closed due to the first man's sin. The entire path to salvation is through the Son. I am willing to accept the Holy Son of God, and as I become His Son, may receive His gift of eternity.
皇帝写的就是当他写天的时候，
These are the emperor's words. Other documents state when he writes heaven, we know what he means. When he writes heaven, this is not a casual choice of wording. His view of heaven is closer to what we call the creator of all things, the one true God, right? They didn't use current Chinese Catholic terms back then. They had their own terminology, specific to their time. So they used their own terminology to explain. After that, they would say, okay, you could use the term. True origin of all things. You can go analyze those words. They aren't heretical. Any Christian, unless you start nitpicking, then you can nitpick.
At the time, the missionaries translated dozens of classic Western scientific works and helped China fabricate hundreds of cannon. Every day, Kangxi would ask Verbiest and two other missionaries, Tomas Pereira and Domingo Fernandez Navarrete, to come to the palace and teach for 2 to 3 hours, covering topics such as astronomy, geography, music, art, anatomy, and medicine. The classes were never interrupted, even when they left Beijing to visit other palaces. Pereira and Jean-François Gerbion helped Emperor Kangxi negotiate China's first peace treaty, the Treaty of Nerchinsk, with Russia's Peter the Great. Emperor Kangxi promised in the name of God to abide by the terms of the treaty. Some years after Verbiest died, the honeymoon phase between the Catholic Church and the Qing dynasty ended. The Catholic Church suffered. The Qing dynasty steadily worsened.